The sky over Montana turned dark as massive shapes descended from the heavens. The alien ships were enormous, their metallic surfaces gleaming like polished mirrors under the fading sunlight. Each vessel moved with a quiet hum, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. People stopped what they were doing, working, driving, talking, and stared upward, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. In the small town of Pine Ridge, Emma raced through the streets, her heart pounding in her chest. She had just tucked her younger brother, Liam, into a hidden spot beneath the floorboards of their family's old barn. "Stay here, no matter what," she had whispered to him before covering the entrance with hay. Now she ran back toward the center of town, hoping to find some way to help or at least understand what was happening. Nearby, Jake stood frozen in his workshop, staring out the window at the alien fleet. His hands tightened around the wrench he had been using to fix an old truck. A former soldier, Jake knew better than most how outmatched humanity was against such advanced technology. But something about the arrogance of the invaders made his blood boil. He set the wrench down and grabbed a rifle from the corner of the room. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The aliens wasted no time. Their ships landed in open fields and on top of buildings, crushing anything beneath them. Out poured the warriors, tall, muscular beings with skin that shimmered like liquid metal. They wore armor that seemed to shift colors depending on the angle of the light. Their eyes glowed faintly, scanning the humans around them with cold indifference. Among the invaders was Kale, one of their strongest warriors. He strode confidently through the town square, his weapon strapped to his side. Cal's species had studied Earth for years, listening to human broadcasts and reading their stories. To him, humanity's tales of legendary heroes were nothing more than amusing myths, fabrications meant to comfort a weak and fragile race. He sneered as he looked at the frightened townspeople, certain that none of them could possibly live up to the legends they cherished. Emma found herself surrounded by aliens as they began rounding up survivors. She tried to fight back when one of them grabbed her arm, but her struggles were useless against their strength. She was thrown into the back of a transport vehicle along with other captives. Her mind raced as she scanned the faces of those around her. Where was Liam? Was he safe? Would anyone even notice if she disappeared? Kale entered the transport bay shortly after, his presence commanding attention. He walked among the prisoners, studying them with detached curiosity. When his gaze fell on Emma, he paused. There was something different about her, a fire in her eyes that hadn't been extinguished, even in captivity. He leaned closer, his voice low and mocking. "Tell me, human," he said, his words translated perfectly by a device in his helmet. "Do you truly believe your stories of great warriors? Do you think someone like King Arthur or Hercules will rise up to save you now?" Emma clenched her fists but said nothing. She refused to give him the satisfaction of a response. Kale smirked, clearly amused by her silence. "We'll see how long your bravery lasts," he said before turning away. Back in the woods outside Pine Ridge, Liam lay curled up beneath the floorboards, clutching a flashlight Emma had left for him. He listened to the distant sounds of destruction and wondered if his sister was still alive. Farther away, Jake loaded his truck with supplies, his jaw set in determination. He didn't know what he could do against such powerful enemies, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to sit idly by while the world fell apart. As night fell, the aliens continued their sweep of the town. Fires burned in the distance, lighting up the horizon. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Humanity's darkest hour had arrived, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance remained. Emma woke up in a cold, sterile room. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. She blinked, trying to focus, but her head felt heavy, as if wrapped in fog. Her arms were strapped to a chair, and the air smelled sharp, like chemicals. Panic bubbled inside her as she realized where she was: an alien laboratory. Around her, strange machines hummed and beeped. Tubes filled with glowing liquids lined the walls, and panels displayed symbols she couldn't understand. The aliens moved around the room, their armor clinking softly as they worked. They spoke in low tones, their voices distorted by their helmets. Emma's heart raced. She wanted to scream, to fight, but she knew it would be useless. These creatures were too strong, too advanced. Cale entered the room, his tall frame towering over everyone else. He walked straight toward Emma, his glowing eyes locking onto hers. "You're awake," he said, his voice calm but mocking. "Good. I have questions." Emma glared at him, her jaw tight. She didn't say a word. Cale tilted his head, studying her like a scientist examining a bug. "Your kind is fascinating," he continued. "So weak, yet so obsessed with stories of strength. Tell me, do you truly believe in your legends? Heroes like King Arthur or Hercules. Do you think they ever existed?" Emma stayed silent, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. Cale smirked, clearly enjoying her defiance. "No matter," he said. "We'll see how long your silence lasts." He turned to one of his soldiers and gave a quick command. The soldier nodded and pressed a button on a nearby panel. A screen lit up, showing images of Earth, cities, forests, and oceans. Cale pointed to the screen. "Your planet is full of myths, stories of warriors who fought impossible battles. But we've seen no proof of such greatness, only weakness." Emma's mind raced. She thought about Liam, hidden safely in the barn. She had to stay strong for him. She couldn't let these aliens break her. Cale leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "Perhaps you'll change your mind when you see what we can do," he said, his tone colder now. "Or perhaps you'll beg us to stop." As Cale stepped away, another prisoner caught Emma's attention. Across the room, a man sat slumped against the wall, his hands bound behind his back. His face was bruised, and his clothes were torn, but his eyes were sharp and alert. When he noticed Emma looking at him, he gave a small nod. It was a gesture of solidarity, a sign that she wasn't alone. Later, when the aliens left the room to check their equipment, the man whispered to her. "My name is Daniel," he said quietly. "If we want to survive, we need to move fast." Emma frowned. "How?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "They're too strong." Daniel glanced at the door, making sure no one was listening. "I've been watching them," he said. "Their weapons are advanced, but they're careless. If we work together, we might have a chance." Emma hesitated. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she didn't have a choice. "What's the plan?" she asked. Daniel explained quickly. He had memorized the layout of the ship during his time as a prisoner. There was a maintenance tunnel that led to the lower levels, and from there, they could reach an escape pod. It was risky, but it was their only hope. Before they could act, Cale returned. This time, he brought a device, a small sphere that floated in the air. It emitted a low hum, and Emma felt a strange pressure in her head. Cale watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "This will help you remember," he said. "Your legends, your heroes. Let's see if they're real." The sphere pulsed, and Emma's vision blurred. Memories flooded her mind. Images of battles, swords clashing, and warriors standing tall against impossible odds. She gasped, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. Cale studied her reaction, his smirk fading slightly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. In the woods outside Pine Ridge, Jake worked tirelessly. He had found an old military bunker while scavenging for supplies. Inside, he discovered crates of weapons and documents detailing human legends. One file mentioned a group of guardians said to possess extraordinary abilities. Jake wasn't sure what to believe, but the timing seemed too coincidental. He decided to investigate further. As night fell, Emma and Daniel prepared to make their move. The aliens were distracted, focusing on their experiments. It was now or never. Together, they slipped into the shadows, heading toward the maintenance tunnel. Every step felt like a gamble, but Emma held on to one thought. Liam was waiting for her. She couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. Emma and Daniel moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors of the alien ship. The walls were cold and smooth, glowing faintly with the same eerie blue light that had filled the lab. Every sound, their footsteps, the hum of the ship's systems, felt deafening in the silence. They stayed close to the shadows, pausing whenever they heard the heavy footsteps of the aliens echoing nearby. Daniel led the way, his knowledge of the ship's layout guiding them. He pointed to a narrow passage ahead. "This leads to the maintenance tunnel," he whispered. "From there, we can reach the lower levels." Emma nodded, her heart pounding. Her hands trembled as she gripped the small blade Daniel had given her earlier. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Kale or one of his soldiers to appear at any moment. The thought made her chest tighten, but she forced herself to stay focused. As they entered the maintenance tunnel, the air grew colder. The passage was cramped and dark, forcing them to crouch as they moved. Pipes lined the walls, dripping condensation onto the metal floor. Emma tried not to think about what might be lurking in the shadows. She focused on Daniel's back, following his every step. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the tunnel. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel held up a hand, signaling for her to stop. They listened carefully, their eyes scanning the darkness. After a moment, the sound faded, and Daniel gestured for them to keep moving. Emma exhaled slowly, though her nerves were still on edge. They reached the end of the tunnel and found themselves in a larger corridor. This area was busier, with more aliens patrolling the area. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, peering around the corner. "We'll need to time this carefully," he said softly. "Wait for my signal." Emma nodded again, her grip tightening on the blade. She watched as Daniel counted silently under his breath. Then, with a quick motion, he darted across the corridor, flattening himself against the opposite wall. Emma followed, her movements clumsy compared to his. For a brief moment, she feared they'd been spotted, but the aliens didn't notice them. They continued like this, slipping from cover to cover, until they finally reached the escape pod bay. The room was large, with several pods lined up along the walls. Most of them looked damaged or inactive, but one pod at the far end seemed intact. Daniel hurried toward it, inspecting the controls. "This one should work," he said, pressing buttons on the panel. The pod's hatch opened with a hiss, revealing a cramped interior. "Get inside." Emma hesitated. "What about you?" she asked. "I'll hold them off," Daniel replied, his tone firm. "You've got people waiting for you. Go." Before Emma could argue, the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears. Cal's voice boomed through the corridor. "Stop them." Emma climbed into the pod, her stomach twisting with guilt. Daniel gave her a final nod before slamming the hatch shut. She watched through the small window as he turned to face the incoming aliens, his expression resolute. The pod launched with a jolt, throwing Emma back against the seat. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the chaos outside. The ship shook as the aliens fired at the escaping pod, but it was too late. The pod broke free, hurtling toward Earth's atmosphere. As the pod descended, Emma's mind raced. She thought about Liam, still hidden in the barn, and Jake, who was out there somewhere fighting his own battles. She also thought about Daniel, who had risked everything to help her escape. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away. There was no time for grief. She had to survive. For Liam, for Daniel, and for everyone else counting on her. The pod crashed into a dense forest, the impact knocking Emma unconscious. When she woke up, sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. She crawled out of the wreckage, her body aching but alive. She took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. She was back on Earth, but the fight was far from over. In the distance, smoke rose from Pine Ridge. The town was still under attack, and Emma knew she couldn't stay hidden for long. She stumbled to her feet, clutching the blade Daniel had given her. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move. She had to find Jake, reunite with Liam, and figure out how to fight back against the invaders. Kale watched the pod disappear from the ship's monitors, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he felt a flicker of doubt. These humans were proving harder to break than he had expected. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. No matter what, they would fall. Legends or not, they were still only human. Emma stumbled through the forest, her legs trembling with every step. Her body ached from the crash, but she pushed forward, driven by a single thought: finding Liam. She clutched the blade Daniel had given her, its cold metal a reminder of the sacrifice he had made for her. The guilt weighed heavily on her chest, but she couldn't afford to stop. Not now. As she moved deeper into the woods, she noticed strange carvings on the trees. At first, they seemed random, lines and symbols etched into the bark. But as she followed them, the markings began to form a pattern. They led her to a hidden cave, its entrance obscured by thick vines and moss. Emma hesitated, unsure if it was safe to enter. But something about the symbols felt familiar, as if they were calling to her. She pushed aside the vines and stepped inside. The air was cool and damp, carrying a faint metallic smell. The walls of the cave glowed faintly, covered in more carvings. These were detailed depictions of battles, humans wielding swords and shields, standing against towering alien figures. Emma's breath caught as she studied the images. They looked like scenes from Earth's legends, but there was something different about them. The warriors weren't just fighting, they were winning. In the center of the cave lay a pedestal, and on it rested a sword. The weapon gleamed despite the dim light, its blade engraved with intricate patterns that matched the carvings on the walls. Emma approached cautiously, her heart pounding. She reached out and touched the hilt, expecting it to be heavy or cold. Instead, it felt warm, almost alive. The moment her fingers closed around the sword, a surge of energy coursed through her body. Her vision blurred, and she saw flashes of ancient battles, warriors clad in armor, their faces determined as they fought against overwhelming odds. She heard voices, whispers urging her to rise, to fight. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vision faded, leaving her breathless and shaken. Daniel appeared at the mouth of the cave, his face pale and weary. "You found it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He limped toward her, leaning against the wall for support. His injuries from the escape were worse than she had realized. "What is this place?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "It's a sanctuary," Daniel replied. "A place where humanity's greatest warriors once trained. Those legends you've heard, they're real. This sword was forged to protect Earth from threats like the ones we face now." Emma stared at him, struggling to process what he was saying. "You're telling me these stories? They actually happened?" Daniel nodded. "Some of them, yes. Over time, people forgot the truth. The stories became myths, but the power behind them never disappeared. That sword chose you, Emma. It means you have the potential to become one of them." Emma shook her head, overwhelmed. "I'm not a warrior. I'm just trying to survive." "You don't have a choice anymore," Daniel said firmly. "The aliens won't stop until they've conquered Earth. If we don't fight back, everyone dies." Emma looked down at the sword in her hands. Its weight felt different now, as if it carried the strength of those who had wielded it before her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "What do I do?" "Train," Daniel said simply. "Learn how to use it. The skills you need are buried deep inside you. You just have to awaken them." Far away, Jake and his group of survivors reached an abandoned library. The building was old and crumbling, its shelves covered in dust. Jake immediately began searching for books and scrolls, hoping to find something that could help them understand the invaders. Sarah stayed close, keeping watch while he worked. Jake pulled a heavy tome from a shelf and flipped through its pages. The text was written in a language he didn't recognize, but the illustrations were clear enough. Humans battling creatures that looked eerily similar to the aliens attacking Earth. He showed the book to Sarah. "These aren't just stories," he said. "They're warnings." Sarah frowned. "Warnings about what?" Jake hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "About them. About what they're capable of. And maybe about how to stop them." Before they could discuss it further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the building. Kale and a squad of his soldiers burst in, their weapons drawn. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," Kale said, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Now you'll pay the price." Jake grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at the nearest alien, buying them a few precious seconds. "Run," he shouted to the others. Chaos erupted as the survivors scattered, dodging blasts of energy from the aliens' weapons. Jake and Sarah fought side by side, using whatever they could find as makeshift weapons. But the aliens were too strong, too fast. One by one, the survivors fell. In the end, only Jake and Sarah remained. Cornered, Sarah turned to Jake, her expression fierce. "Go," she said. "Find the others. Keep fighting." Before Jake could protest, Sarah lunged at the aliens, drawing their fire. Jake hesitated for a split second, then ran. Behind him, he heard Sarah's final cry of defiance before everything went silent. Tears burned in Jake's eyes as he fled into the night. He clenched his fists, vowing to honor Sarah's sacrifice. Whatever it took, he would keep going. Humanity's survival depended on it. Emma trained day and night in the hidden cave, her body pushed to its limits. Daniel guided her, teaching her how to wield the sword with precision and strength. At first, Emma struggled. Her movements were clumsy, her strikes weak. But with each passing hour, she grew stronger, faster, more confident. The sword seemed to guide her, its weight becoming lighter as if it knew her intentions. Daniel watched her progress with a mix of pride and concern. "You're learning quickly," he said one evening as they rested by the fire. "But this power comes at a cost. It will test you in ways you can't imagine." Emma nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she could feel it. The energy within her was growing, surging through her veins like a river threatening to overflow. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Meanwhile, Jake wandered through the ruins of a nearby city, his mind heavy with grief over Sarah's sacrifice. He carried the ancient book he had found in the library, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and illustrations. Though he couldn't read the text, the images spoke volumes. Warriors battling alien invaders, wielding weapons that glowed with unnatural light. Jake knew these weren't just stories. They were blueprints, clues to humanity's survival. He reached the outskirts of the city and spotted smoke rising in the distance. Following it, he found a group of survivors huddled around a makeshift campfire. Among them was Emma, sitting cross-legged on the ground, the sword resting across her lap. Jake froze, staring at the weapon. It looked familiar, though he couldn't place why. Emma noticed him and stood up, her expression wary. "Who are you?" she asked, gripping the sword tightly. Jake raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "My name is Jake. I've been looking for people who know something about this." He held up the book. Emma stepped closer, studying the illustrations. Her eyes widened as she recognized the symbols. They matched the carvings in the cave. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "An old library," Jake replied. "I think it's connected to whatever's happening now. To those aliens." Emma hesitated, then lowered the sword slightly. "We might need your help," she admitted. She introduced him to Daniel, who listened intently as Jake explained his discovery. Together, they decided to follow the map inside the book, which marked several locations tied to Earth's legendary warriors. The journey was treacherous. The group traveled through dense forests, barren deserts, and crumbling cities, always staying one step ahead of the aliens. Along the way, Emma continued to train, honing her skills under Daniel's watchful eye. She began to notice changes in herself. Her senses became sharper, her reflexes quicker. The sword felt like an extension of her arm, responding to her every thought. At their second destination, an ancient temple hidden beneath a mountain, they uncovered murals depicting a warrior clad in golden armor. The figure stood victorious over alien foes, holding a weapon identical to Emma's. Jake traced the image with his fingers, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just history," he muttered. "It's prophecy." Before they could decipher the inscriptions, Kale and his soldiers attacked. The aliens descended upon them without warning, their weapons blazing. Chaos erupted as the group scrambled for cover. Daniel shouted orders, directing everyone to fight back while protecting Emma. Emma stepped forward, raising the sword. A wave of energy surged through her, and she swung the blade with all her strength. The resulting shockwave knocked several aliens off their feet. Kale watched from a distance, his glowing eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, he saw the truth behind the legends. He saw the power humanity truly possessed. Jake fought alongside Emma, using a broken piece of metal as a makeshift weapon. He shouted to the others, urging them to fall back. One by one, the survivors retreated into the tunnels beneath the temple, leaving Kale and his forces behind. As they regrouped in the safety of the tunnels, Emma leaned against a wall, exhausted but alive. Jake approached her, his face grim. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," he said. "You're fighting for all of us." Emma nodded, her grip tightening on the sword. She understood now what Daniel had meant about the cost of power. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, mental, spiritual. But she also knew there was no turning back. The legends were real, and she was part of them. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on. Emma and Jake stood side by side in the dimly lit tunnel, their breathing heavy from the fight. The survivors gathered around them, some injured, others visibly shaken, but all alive. Emma glanced at the sword in her hand, its glow faint but steady. She felt a strange connection to it, as if it were whispering encouragement, urging her to keep going. Daniel limped forward, his face pale but determined. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice firm despite his injuries. "They'll find us soon." Jake nodded, scanning the group. "We need to move fast. The map leads to one more location, the final site. If we're lucky, we'll find something there that can turn the tide." Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Then let's go. We've come this far. We can't stop now." The group moved quickly through the tunnels, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone walls. The air grew colder as they descended deeper underground, but no one complained. They had seen what was at stake, and fear had given way to determination. Kale paced aboard his ship, frustration simmering beneath his cold exterior. The reports of Emma's actions troubled him. A single human wielding a sword had defeated several of his soldiers, a feat that should have been impossible. He clenched his fists, his glowing eyes narrowing. "She's not just a survivor," he muttered to himself. "She's something else." His second-in-command approached cautiously. "Sir, our forces are stretched thin. The humans are resisting harder than anticipated." Kale turned sharply, his voice sharp. "Then we crush them harder. Find her. Bring me the girl with the sword." Hours later, Emma and the group emerged from the tunnels into a desolate canyon. The map indicated that the final location lay at its center, a massive stone structure half buried in the earth. As they approached, Emma felt a pull, an almost magnetic force drawing her toward the ruins. The others noticed it too, exchanging uneasy glances. Inside the structure, they found a chamber filled with relics, ancient weapons, shields, and artifacts arranged in careful patterns. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, similar to the one in the cave where Emma had found the sword. On it rested a small, glowing orb. Jake hesitated. "What is that?" Daniel stepped closer, his expression grim. "It's the weapon mentioned in the legends, the ultimate power to protect Earth." Emma reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the orb. A surge of energy coursed through her, stronger than anything she had felt before. Visions flooded her mind. heroes rising against alien invaders, humanity standing united. She gasped, pulling her hand back. Before anyone could react, Kale and his soldiers stormed into the chamber. Their weapons hummed with energy as they surrounded the group. Kale's gaze locked onto Emma, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've led us on quite the chase, human, but it ends here." Emma raised the sword, her stance firm. "Not today." The battle erupted instantly. Emma moved with speed and precision, her strikes fueled by the power of the sword. Jake fought beside her, using whatever he could find as a weapon. The survivors joined in, throwing rocks, wielding broken pieces of debris, and doing everything they could to hold their ground. Kale watched, his confidence wavering. He had underestimated these humans, and now they were proving to be more than he had imagined. He stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Enough of this," he shouted. But before he could act, Emma lunged, her sword clashing against his blade. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through the chamber, knocking everyone off their feet. Kale stumbled back, his expression one of disbelief. For the first time, he saw the truth. He wasn't facing ordinary humans. He was facing legends reborn. As the fight raged on, the orb began to pulse with light. Its glow intensified, filling the chamber with a blinding radiance. Emma felt its energy merging with hers, amplifying her strength. She swung the sword one final time, releasing a wave of power that sent Kale and his soldiers flying. When the light faded, the aliens lay unconscious, their weapons deactivated. Emma dropped to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Jake knelt beside her, his voice soft. "You did it." Emma shook her head, tears in her eyes. "Not yet. There's still more to do." The survivors gathered around her, their faces filled with hope. Together, they knew they had taken the first step toward reclaiming Earth. But the war was far from over. The canyon was eerily quiet as Emma and the survivors regrouped outside the ancient structure. The orb's energy still lingered in the air, a faint hum vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Emma held the sword tightly, its glow dimming but still present. She felt drained, her body aching from the fight. But there was no time to rest. Cal's forces were scattered, but they wouldn't stay down for long. Jake approached her, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We need to get moving," he said, glancing at the horizon. "They'll send reinforcements soon." Emma nodded, her jaw set. "We stick together. No one gets left behind." The group began their trek through the canyon, heading toward the ruins of Pine Ridge. It was risky. Returning to the town meant risking another confrontation with the aliens, but it was also necessary. The invaders had taken over the area, and if humanity had any hope of reclaiming Earth, they needed to strike back where it hurt most. As they moved, Liam's face flashed in Emma's mind. She hadn't seen him since hiding him in the barn, and the thought of what might have happened tore at her heart. She pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task ahead. She couldn't afford to break now, not when so many were counting on her. Kale stood aboard his ship, his glowing eyes fixed on the monitors displaying images of the canyon. His soldiers had failed him again, and it infuriated him. These humans, these fragile, primitive beings, had somehow tapped into a power that rivaled his own. He clenched his fists, his voice cold as he addressed his crew. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to end this now." The alien ships descended upon Pine Ridge, their shadows blotting out the sun. Soldiers poured into the streets, their weapons ready. The town was already in ruins, but Kale wasn't there to destroy. It was about sending a message. Humanity's resistance would be crushed, once and for all. Emma and the survivors reached the edge of the town just as the ships arrived. They took cover behind a crumbling wall, watching as the aliens spread out. Jake peered around the corner, his expression grim. "There's too many of them," he whispered. "We can't take them head on." Emma gripped the sword tighter, her mind racing. "We don't have to. We hit them where it hurts." Their leader, Daniel, nodded in agreement. "If we can get to Kel, we might be able to stop them. Without him, their forces will fall apart." The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. Splitting into smaller groups, the survivors launched a series of diversionary attacks, drawing the aliens' attention away from the center of town. Emma, Jake, and Daniel moved quickly, slipping through the chaos toward the largest ship. Inside the ship, Cale paced, his frustration mounting. The reports of scattered attacks confused him. These humans were fighting like nothing he had seen before, organized, relentless, fearless. He stopped as a sudden realization struck him. "It's her," he muttered. "That girl. She's leading them." Before he could act, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared as explosions rocked the hull. Emma and the others had breached the vessel, using makeshift explosives to disable its defenses. Cale growled, grabbing his weapon. "Enough of this," he shouted, storming toward the source of the attack. Emma faced him, the sword raised. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her grip was firm. "This ends now," she said, her voice steady despite her fatigue. Cale sneered, raising his weapon. "You think you can defeat me? You're nothing but a weak human." Emma didn't respond. Instead, she charged, her movements fueled by determination. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying with each strike. Cale was strong, his blows powerful, but Emma's speed and precision gave her the edge. She fought not just for herself, but for every person the aliens had hurt, for Liam, for Sarah, for all of humanity. Jake and Daniel fought nearby, holding off Cale's soldiers. The battle was fierce, the air thick with smoke and the sound of clashing metal. Slowly but surely, the survivors gained the upper hand, their defiance unyielding. Finally, Emma found an opening. With one swift motion, she disarmed Cale, pinning him to the ground with the tip of her sword. His glowing eyes widened in shock as he stared up at her. For the first time, he saw her not as a weak human, but as something far greater, a warrior born from legend. "You were wrong," Emma said, her voice low but clear. "The legends are real." Outside, the remaining alien ships began to retreat, their forces in disarray. The survivors cheered, their voices echoing through the ruins. But Emma knew the victory was bittersweet. The war wasn't over, and the cost had been high. Still, as she looked at the faces of those who had fought beside her, she felt a spark of hope. Together, they had proven that humanity wasn't weak. It was resilient, brave, and unbreakable. The sun rose over Pine Ridge, its light casting long shadows across the ruins. The air was still thick with smoke, but the sounds of battle had faded. Emma stood at the center of the town square, her sword resting at her side. Her body ached, and her hands were raw from gripping the blade, but she felt a strange calm. Around her, survivors worked together to tend to the wounded and clear the debris. It was a small victory, but it was enough to ignite hope. Jake approached her, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes filled with determination. "We've done what we can here," he said, his voice steady. "Now it's time to think about the future." Emma nodded, glancing at the faces of those around her. "We've proven that we can fight back," she said. "But this isn't just about us. It's about everyone who's still out there, everyone who needs to know they're not alone." Daniel limped toward them, leaning heavily on a makeshift cane. His injuries were severe, but his spirit remained unbroken. "The legends aren't just stories," he said softly. "They're lessons. Humanity has faced threats like this before, and each time we've risen to meet them. Now it's our turn to carry that torch." Emma looked down at the sword in her hand. Its glow had dimmed, but she could still feel its energy pulsing faintly. She thought about all she had been through, the escape, the training, the battles, and realized that the weapon wasn't just a tool. It was a symbol of humanity's strength, a reminder that even in their darkest hour, they could find power within themselves. Cale knelt aboard his ship, his armor scratched and dented. He watched as his soldiers prepared for departure, their movements hurried and uncertain. For the first time in his life, he felt doubt. These humans, they weren't what he had expected. They were fragile, Yes, but also resilient, courageous, and united. He clenched his fists, his glowing eyes distant. Perhaps we underestimated them, he muttered to himself. As the ship lifted off, Cale glanced one last time at the ruins below. He saw Emma standing tall, surrounded by survivors who refused to give up. There was something about her, a spark of defiance that reminded him of the warriors from his own people's history. He turned away, his expression unreadable, and gave the order to leave Earth behind. Back in Pine Ridge, Emma found Liam hiding in the barn exactly where she had left him. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged him tightly, promising never to let him go again. Liam clung to her, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I knew you'd come back," he whispered. Jake gathered the survivors, explaining their next steps. "We need to spread the word," he said. "Tell others what happened here. Show them that we can fight back." Emma stepped forward, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "This isn't the end," she said firmly. "It's just the beginning. We've shown the aliens what we're capable of, and now it's time to take back our world." The group cheered, their voices echoing through the ruins. Together, they began to rebuild, not just the town, but the hope that had been lost. Emma led the way, her sword held high as a beacon of strength. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew they weren't alone. Humanity had faced darkness before, and each time, it had emerged stronger. In the days that followed, stories of Emma's bravery spread far and wide. People began to rise up, inspired by her courage. The legends of old were no longer myths. They were alive, carried forward by those who refused to surrender. Cale returned to his home planet, his mind heavy with thoughts of Earth. When his commanders demanded answers, he simply shook his head. "They are not weak," he said quietly. "They're legends. They are real." As the alien fleet disappeared into the stars, Emma stood atop a hill overlooking Pine Ridge. The town was scared, but it was alive. The survivors worked together, planting seeds of hope amidst the ashes. Emma smiled faintly, knowing that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or technology. It was in its heart, its unity, and its refusal to give up. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt certain of one thing: humanity would prevail. And when the next threat came, they would be ready. Because the legends weren't just stories. They were a promise that no matter how dark the night, the dawn would always come.